G'day mate, 40 here, taking a walk just outside of UCLA. It is 8:36 a.m. on Wednesday, October 16, and the Jewish holiday of Sukkot begins tonight. It's known as Tabernacles, and got stopped by a black guy wanting to know what's that citrus thing that all the Jews are buying right now. It's called a lulav and etrog. Right, it's a commandment in the Torah, so it's a branch and a big lemon-like fruit, because all Jewish holidays have an agricultural meaning, historical meaning, national meaning, and a spiritual / religious meaning. Too with Sukkot, which is also known as Tabernacles. So in the early years of conversion to Judaism, I wanted to talk about Judaism 24/7, and I became incredibly obnoxious. I am such an enthusiast. When I moved to America and I discovered American sports, I'd write back page after page to my friends in Australia about the glories of the National Football League, and they weren't interested. So one of the good things about growing older is I'm better able to gauge other people's level of interest. And now I essentially only talk about Judaism when somebody asks me about it, or I'm with friends who are open to that conversation. I find it obnoxious when people bring up their religion out of the blue and try to proselytize me, or just try to share religious teachings from their particular tradition that I did not request. I find it particularly obnoxious in 12-step settings where we want to transcend these partisan denominational differences. And so I've been participating in 12-step programs for 13 years, and I've never shared in a meeting the wisdom of Rabbi Akiva or this or that rabbi. I've never shared insights from the Talmud or any Jewish text. When I'm talking with the sponsees or talking with a sponsor or just doing program calls, I just leave my religion to the side. It's interesting when you meet someone who is normally not articulate, but then when they become articulate, they just light up, right? Because they're talking about something they're passionate about. And the topic of sex just lights up Kamala Harris, man. She just moves from this vacuous, empty person who seems to have nothing going on in her head and who is just phonetically sounding out words that have been written for her or that she's memorized. But then when the topic comes to killing babies, abortion, then she lights up, right? Topics that have to do with sex, right? She becomes a completely different person. And you see this advice given to people who want to become public speakers or podcasters. Talk about what you know. And Kamala Harris knows sex, man. She is a sexpert. She got to where she is in large part through her sexual charms. And that's the one topic that makes her light up like a Christmas tree, right? The absolute necessity of allowing women to terminate the lives of their babies, right, while they're carrying them in the womb. And no, we never say to a pregnant woman, how's the fetus, right? We only say, how's the baby when a woman's pregnant. So yeah, abortion's about killing babies. And I am not for making abortion illegal in the first 3 months. I'm not opposed to it either. I don't have a strong agenda with regard to abortion, except in the sense I regard the overwhelming number of abortions in the United States as immoral, and the cavalier way that abortion is talked about as a matter of health care and a woman's choice and safety for women. Right? It's not a baby is not a part of her body, it's in her body. And the idea that only the woman should have any say, that the father should have no say, and that the baby has no rights and no say. So, count me profoundly skeptical and turned off by the ease with which most Americans have abortions. And even though I don't want to make it illegal, I have disgust at people who are so careless that they get pregnant and then kill their baby because it's inconvenient for them. All right, let's have a look at the chat. Where are we? Not holding a Bible, bro. We are just outside of UCLA in Westwood, California. We are 5 miles east of Santa Monica and the Pacific Ocean. So I remember there was this dinner party that I was at, and I had a pretty flat affect. I don't get excited about most people. I'm not a super people person. I'm evenly balanced between extrovert and introvert. And I was just going along with this dinner party that I'd been invited to by a secretary of one of the movie producers I'd interviewed. So in 2002, I released a book, The Producer's Profiles in Frustration, where I interviewed about 100 TV and movie producers. And the secretary, one of the producers I interviewed, invited me to this dinner party, and she hoped that I'd then set her up with Passover invites, which I never did pull off. But anyway, I was just going along at this dinner party, and then they brought out the dessert, which was like some mango dish, and it just came completely alive. Somehow that mango dessert just transformed my personality. And so you see the transformative power of sex with Kamala Harris, right? When the topic turns to sex and the case for keeping abortion legal and easy, right? She just turns from this vacuous, dull, empty-headed woman to fired up. So it says something about her that's the issue that she's passionate about. She seems completely empty-headed and vacuous with regard to foreign policy. She seems empty-headed and vacuous with regard to almost all political issues. This has to be the most vacuous, ignorant, unimpressive, maladroit presidential candidate in many, many years in the United States. I can't recall when we had someone as unimpressive as Kamala Harris. But the most ordinary person can become erudite, passionate, and compelling when they talk about something that they're excited about. So just like me at that dinner party, and suddenly the dessert came out and it was mango, and I just got excited. I just completely transformed. And just like that plain girl who you wouldn't give her a second thought, but then she smiles or she says something wise and witty, and it just transforms how you feel about her. But it is revealing of Kamala Harris. Why is this the one topic, sex, that makes her light up? Why isn't she passionate about anything else? Why isn't she informed about anything else? Why isn't she eloquent about anything else? Why can't she talk off the cuff about any other topic in a compelling, attention-grabbing way? And have you noticed that her campaign has returned to the theme that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy? So that was the losing campaign that Joe Biden was running for months. And it receives very little resonance with ordinary Americans, right? So your average American who doesn't have a 401k plan and doesn't own their own home has been going backwards in their standard of living during the Biden administration. And so compared to their visceral concerns of paying the bills, providing for their family, perhaps even saving for retirement, right? Abstract questions of democracies on the ballot just has no resonance. Now, Kamala has returned to it with a twist. She is, like throughout her campaign, she's copying Donald Trump's playbook. So she's throwing up a big screen at her rallies, and she's playing things that Donald Trump has said, right? The wackiest, craziest things, most outlandish things that Donald Trump has said, and then said, this man's a threat. He's stable. He's weird. You should be viscerally repelled by this guy and frightened by this guy. And so it is a refinement on the Biden platform of Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. And I think it has some effectiveness, because even if you're going to vote for Trump, like I will, you have to admit that there's a lot of the crazy in him. He says crazy things. He's not disciplined. He doesn't seem to be particularly good at running things. He violates all sorts of social norms that Americans took for granted. January 6th was a giant blot on his record. The way he tried to contest the 2020 election results, a giant blot on his record when he talks about using the Justice Department and the military to go after his enemies. All right, so there are ways that Donald Trump says these extreme things that are similar to what other politicians say in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And then there are ways that he goes way beyond normal political discourse. So you can recognize similarities, because the Democrats, going back to 2000, many of their leaders have actively tried to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the electoral process. They tried to cast doubt on the legitimacy of the COVID vaccine that was developed under Donald Trump. And then they would just turn around on a dime and condemn Donald Trump for many of the same things that they were just condemning. So I recognize there are legitimate fears and concerns about Donald Trump, right? He's a wacky guy. He's an undisciplined guy. He's an old guy. He's 78. He's incredibly temperamental, incredibly childish at times, self-centered, reckless. But overall, I think he did a good job in his first term, and I believe that he will do a better job in his next term. But there are all sorts of legitimate concerns that people opposed to Donald Trump have. But where they fall down is where they don't recognize the extent to which Donald Trump's extreme rhetoric is being echoed by members of their team. So you make a much more effective case if you note members of my own team said many of the same sort of things that Donald Trump is saying now, and that was wrong both for my team as well as for Trump. And at the same time, there are some ways that Donald Trump goes above and beyond and outside of any other conventional American political rhetoric. So that would be a much more compelling case, but you never seem to hear that, right? I hear people joining Mark Halperin's twice daily political show and talking about how Donald Trump's going to set up concentration camps in America for his enemies and for the news media. And I think it's completely absurd. And this argument that he's some unique threat to democracy is vastly overblown. Once you overstate a point, you lose credibility. Right? A single overstatement usually has the power to just completely blow your credibility with someone who is otherwise taking you seriously. And Trump's critics just constantly undermine their own case by their overstatement. And if democracy is on the ballot, that means over the past 3.5 years under Joe Biden, that we must have had a flourishing of human freedom and democracy and principle and the enforcement of the rule of law under the Biden administration. And does anyone resonate with that? I mean, look at all the indictments of Donald Trump. They're overwhelmingly politically motivated. The way that Democrats use the justice system to indict Donald Trump and to convict Donald Trump by passing new laws, running for Attorney General in New York on the platform of indicting Donald Trump. So it's a bit rich for then Democrats to complain that Donald Trump plans to politicize the justice system when that's exactly what they've been doing. Now, there will inevitably be a political dimension to the enforcement of law because all laws are interpreted and enforced by human beings who are affected by their own neurological and physiological structures, out of which comes their experience and orientation towards life, which then leads to a particular type of politics. And let's go to the chat. No, I'm not holding a Bible. But if you're going to live your life by one book, why is the Bible such a bad selection? Yeah, Kamala loves abortion. She loves booze. I don't understand why her obvious signs of intoxication aren't covered and explained. If it's not intoxication that's going on, what exactly is going on? Greetings of love from Palestine. America is a hypersensitive society which is offended by tone, words, and context. Is there any society that's not hypersensitive? In my life experience, everybody is hypersensitive to any threats to their own well-being and their own status. How long have I been living in West Hollywood? I've been living in West Los Angeles for 30 years. You don't even sound American, buddy. That's because I'm from Australia, mate. I moved to America when I was 11 years of age, moved to the Napa Valley. I've lived in California primarily since 1977. So I've spent a couple of years back overall in Australia since then. So I am 5 miles east of Santa Monica. We are right now, this is not West Hollywood, this is Westwood next to UCLA. West Hollywood is north of Melrose. So I think depending on our worldview, in addition to our genetics, physiology, and early upbringing, we can probably dial up and down our sensitivity levels. I live in California, bro, since 1977. California is not the USA. Yeah, I'm a dual citizen. I'm an Australian citizen, an American citizen. Sometimes I spend 2 or 3 months a year in Australia. Particularly love Sydney. Yeah, but there's nothing threatening their well-being except themselves. Look, it's no more natural to be sensitive to how you're treated by other people. Right? We are wired to be constantly assessing where we stand with other people because our very survival depends on it. Right? An individualist strategy is a lousy strategy for life. All right, you're going to be much better off living in a group strategy. And so I have said so many offensive things over the course of my life that I have continually had the experience of being shunned. And it is not a pleasant feeling. My late co-host, James DiGiorgio, with whom I did shows about over 20 years ago, he apparently died recently. But he told me he was Italian American. He said Jews invented shunning, but pretty much every people have attuned abilities to shun, and so in my desire to provoke or simply to say what I think is true or to get attention, I've often said something that has just turned everyone around me against me. I get reported to HR, I'd get reported to the teacher, I'd get reported to my parents, I'd get sued, I'd get reported to the rabbis. So to use the Australian vernacular, I've spent my entire life getting dobbed on, reported on. I remember I was at the Stephen S. Wise Reform Synagogue, and I said something offensive about how cantors were boring to listen to. A cantor is someone who sings the prayers aloud in a synagogue, and that communal singing was much more fun. And everyone who was sitting with me on my row, moved, got up and moved, just completely shunned me. My God. So many of my problems with self-control and attuning myself to what is socially permitted have been considerably reduced since getting on ADHD medication. My longtime therapist suggested that I should call my memoir The Uninvited. One of my keenest and most painful memories is that in second grade, my classmate Gavin Brown didn't want to invite me to his birthday party, but my best friend's mum basically turned the screws with Gavin's father and forced them to invite me. And then when I go along, we're all on our bikes, proceeding through the bush, and then the other boys made sure to let me know, we didn't want you. But hey, back to the main point. If democracy is under such grave threat right now from Donald Trump, are we living in a flourishing of objective democracy and objective enforcement of the law under the Biden administration? And I just don't see that. I remember under Barack Obama, all sorts of right-wing organizations and Tea Party organizations wouldn't get tax-deductible status because the IRS was mobilized against them. We know by federal election donations that from federal government employees, they go 20-1 against Donald Trump. So there is something to the deep state. Right? Federal government employees overwhelmingly are opposed to Donald Trump. By their donations, they are 20-1 against Donald Trump. And the same with state government employees as well. And when you go to the DMV or to the post office, is that a pleasant and productive experience that fills you with faith in the power and fairness of American institutions? It damages my faith in democracy when you have such massive amounts of affirmative action. There was a long article in the New York Times today about how the University of Michigan has spent hundreds of millions of dollars pushing a diversity, equity, inclusion agenda, including hiring hundreds of people to police, enforce, and promote diversity, equity, inclusion, which overwhelmingly means restrictions on freedom of speech on the part of those who are not down with affirmative action, and the aggressive promotion of people who aren't qualified. How's that working out? I want to go to a doctor who did not need affirmative action to get into medical school. I want to fly on planes that are piloted by people who did not receive affirmative action. Right? I don't want my life being in the hands of beneficiaries of affirmative action. And when you promote affirmative action and you penalize merit, so Obamacare, for example, was a massive multi-trillion-dollar transfer from the productive citizens of America to the unproductive citizens. I don't like that. I think we should be incentivizing productive, law-abiding, pro-social activities, and we should be penalizing those who just leech off the system. And affirmative action, diversity, equity, inclusion programs, they destroy morale because we naturally attune to living within a small tribe, within a like-minded tribe. And trying to stop this ancient practice of living in a tribe and trying to force you to spend time around and to be at the whims of those with whom you feel nothing in common is demoralizing. It does not fill me with faith and joy in our democracy. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the diversity, equity, and inclusion candidates. Right? They're incredibly vacuous. They're the least qualified candidates for the American presidency and vice presidency that I remember in my lifetime. It kills morale, it kills social cohesion, it kills social trust. It's incredibly discouraging, it's dispiriting, it reduces incentives for excellence to be pushing affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion policies. And the University of Michigan has been ruined. Morale has been ruined, cohesion and trust. The campus have been ruined through the hundreds of millions of dollars spent promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the upshot of all these policies basically is to hate white people and hate Jews in particular as the embodiment of white people in the Middle East who are supposedly the cause of all the Middle East problems. So you have one productive, flourishing country in the Middle East where you have some degree of human rights, you have a functioning democracy, you have a functioning free press, you have scientific advancements, you have technological and entrepreneurial advancements, right? Compared to the primitive state of the Arab Islamic world around Israel, which is just incredibly backward. And I don't think that's inherent in being Arab or in being a Muslim, right? The Arab Islamic world has had its times of glory, but they've not included the last 700 years. And the upshot of these hundreds of million dollars spent promoting diversity, equity, inclusion is to promote loathing and hatred and genocidal intentions towards Jews and the Jewish state at the University of Michigan and at American elite universities. Because you have the growth of anti-settler, anti-colonial, anti-imperialist ideologies, which basically boil down to we hate white people because they've been more successful, more effective, more dominant than other groups. And so we're going to cast them as the bad guys because it fills us with too much shame to see what they've accomplished while our own group has had much less accomplishment. So much of hatred of Jews and hatred of white people and hatred of Europeans and hatred of Americans, hatred of Australians, right, is simply based on that these groups are far more effective and successful. So how do you react to people who excel you? Do you just hate them? Or do you want to learn from them? Right? The wise man wants to learn. The idiot just wants to hate. California is not the US. Well, it depends where you go in California. I'm in West LA. It's pretty nice. These streets are pretty clean. And when I go to an Orthodox synagogue, I'm around my fellow Trump supporters. Look, is it true that kangaroos can box? Absolutely. So my brother had a pet kangaroo, and it used to sleep upside down in a pair of jeans that he hung on a door handle. But then after about 2 years of age, the kangaroo got too big, and so they they couldn't handle it anymore. It would just jump over the fence, and they can become quite aggressive. They've got claws. You really don't want to start boxing and fighting with a kangaroo if you can possibly help it. Crip Blue says, I can't believe I just raw dogged a prostitute. Maybe she was clean, bro. Maybe she was tested. Don't ever stop being open and honest. Speak the truth. It's a dying characteristic. Thank you. So in the Bible, right, God tells the prophet Hosea that he must go marry a prostitute. Crip Blue, did God tell you to raw dog a prostitute asking for a friend? So did the prophet Hosea raw dog a prostitute, and did it get any nasty diseases? I've never caught an STD. I guess men in general are much less vulnerable to catching them. Shunning is deflection. There's always a reason. You can't be shunned if you don't care about it. Shunning is a people thing, not a God thing. Therapy is just a racket. Well, there's good therapy and there's bad therapy. Right? There's good medicine and there's bad medicine. When you get shunned, it's incredibly painful if it comes from people you care about. But before I was medicated for ADHD, I just couldn't help blurting out the inappropriate things that would bring on the shunning. Also, I love just saying what I believe to be true, describing reality as I see it, and I've been blogging since July 3, 1997, and so that's often brought on the shunning. Jesus won't shun you if you try to do good and believe in him. So yeah, I believe that religion, faith in Jesus, faith in God, for many people is a more effective, more adaptive, more uplifting, more righteous, more holy, more elevated way to go through life. That you will feel less lonely if you feel connected to Jesus or connected to God. I'm an Orthodox Jew, and it provides a way to connect easily with other people. One of the things I love about sports bars is how easy it is to connect with others. And you just go to a sports bar, and even the most socially awkward person can cheer at what's going on the screen and talk to other people and find some level of connection, which is why suicides go down whenever you have major sporting events, because even the most socially awkward can get out there and connect with others. But religion is also a superb way to learn to bond with others, and it's not just enough to be good with Jesus or to be good with God. It is important to get along with other people, to have your tribe, your family, real, virtual, your creative family or your biological family. Right. Religion is a terrific in-group strategy. Not for everyone, right? Some people just don't seem cut out for the religious life, but a large percentage of people seem to do much better with the strong identity that comes with religion. Now, Europeans laugh at the friendliness of American churches because most Europeans, I believe, still live and die within a few miles of where they were born, and their ancestors lived where they lived for many generations going back. And so Europeans usually have a real sense of community that Americans and Australians do not. And when you go to church or synagogue in America, you get a simulacra of that sense of feeling. So America is incredibly mobile. It's ruthlessly competitive. And when you go to church or synagogue, you just get a little intimation. You get an attempt to approximate that feeling of rootedness and genuine tradition and connection that I would suspect most Europeans take for granted. Yeah, God can read your heart and knows your true intentions. But God is not enough, right? Isn't that a lesson from the early chapters of Genesis where God says it is not good for man to be alone? And why did God say to Adam, it's not good for man to be alone? Because Adam had God. But God recognized that even God's not enough. You need other people too. what's up with Tim Walz's strange grimaces? And that guy just seems so gay. His mannerisms seem incredibly queer. So are we going to learn more about Tim Walz hanging out at gay bars in Minneapolis? That guy is the queerest guy that I remember running for vice president or president in as long as I can remember in American history. DEI fuels animosity, creates division. Do I think that Mark Halperin made a mistake by appearing on Tucker? No, but I did ask myself, why is he going on Tucker after that ridiculous show that Tucker put out October 1st, was it, with Darryl Cooper, the Nazi apologist, and Tucker was praising Cooper as this great historian. Tucker could not have done more damage to the Donald Trump election campaign if he had tried. So, in defense of going on Tucker, he hasn't repeated that. Right? That was a major gaffe, and he's moved on. It's not a theme that he's hammering day in and day out. So we should give people some grace that they will make mistakes, and as long as they learn from their mistakes, then go on the show. But I would thought about that. Why did Mark Halperin go on Tucker after Tucker made such an ass of himself? Now, it was a terrific show. You've got to watch that Tucker Carlson interview released yesterday with Mark Halperin. And Mark says that the news media, by failing to report on Joe Biden's obvious episodic senility, is the greatest journalism scandal in American history. Wow. Mark Halperin went after the news media hard for their bias against Trump and against Republicans. And Halperin is not a conservative, right? He's a big city Jew, but he does show considerable empathy for all the major sides of the political spectrum. And the sound quality of that Mark Halperin interview with Tucker Carlson was just superb. It was just a whole different experience. It was unlike anything else that I recall hearing in my Apple earbuds. What was the secret sauce for creating such superb sound quality? So I am using heavy compression today for the first time on this live stream with my Shure mic, and I bumped the gain up from 21 to 24. You can quickly apply logic to the illogical and pray for them. That's all you can do, says the chat. So Kamala Harris will appear on Bret Baier's show today, and I expect that Bret will ask her some tough questions, and I would hope that he will follow up when she tries to blow him off. So one question that I haven't seen her face is, when did you notice Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline? So Mark Halperin recalls in 2017 he saw signs of Joe Biden's severe, dramatic cognitive decline. And Mark Halperin thought, well, it's good that Joe is no longer in political office. And then he mounted a basement campaign, right, only probably due to COVID was Biden able to successfully hide his cognitive deficits in the 2020 campaign. And it is not as though he is obviously senile and impaired all the time. Right? I'm sure we all know old people, and they have good days and bad days. And Joe Biden has good days and bad days. But that the news media, right, the liberal conventional mainstream news media wasn't talking about Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline in an intense way until Biden's disastrous performance June 27th against Donald Trump is an indictment of the news. And Mark Halperin says that when he talks to people in the news media, they often confide in him that we cannot we cannot do anything that might facilitate a Donald Trump victory. I mean, that's the widespread sense. And so they're careful not to repeat what they see as their mistakes in the 2016 campaign, when they gave too much press to the WikiLeaks of leaked DNC emails. So they are hyper vigilant to essentially not do anything that might be used to assist a Donald Trump election, which creates such a distorted presentation of the news. And Halperin has been making this point for months, to expect a severe mental health crisis on the left if Donald Trump is elected. Right? It's going to be devastating, because people on the left tend to have much more invested in politics than people on the right. So it's approximately a 2-hour interview. And it was a good interview. It was one of the better interviews that Tucker has done. Tucker is not a great interviewer. Sometimes he's pretty good. What Tucker has going for him is a sense of authenticity. But he usually does not ask tough questions of his guests. My God, is the Drudge Report completely in the tank for the Democrats. I still check it out every morning. Still a useful compendium of links. But they just seize on everything possible to discredit Donald Trump. So yesterday we got news that made Israel's slow response to the Iranian missile barrage make more sense. So apparently Israel's strategic air defense is running low on interceptor missiles. And so if Israel strikes Iran, Iran has over 3,000 ballistic missiles to fire back at Israel. And apparently Israel is running low on interceptor missiles. And so its air defense is considerably reduced. Israel apparently is going to be much more vulnerable to a follow-up Iranian barrage. And so that helps to explain why Israel hasn't attacked Iran yet, and why Israel is changing its conduct of the war to better fit in with the Biden administration's dictates, because Israel desperately needs resupply. Right? Israel is apparently running low on all sorts of weapons. It desperately needs American armaments, and the Biden administration shipped the most sophisticated American anti-missile battery over to Israel. And so, due to its desperate state of running low on the weapons that it needs, Israel is following the dictates largely of the Biden administration. It's reducing its strikes on Beirut. It's agreeing not to hit Iran's nuclear facilities or oil facilities. Now, when Donald Trump was asked about this, he said that Biden's pronouncement that Israel should not touch Iran's nuclear facilities was ridiculous, that the first thing Israel should do was to hit Iran's nuclear facilities. And so, against the overwhelming conventional opinion in the mainstream media that there will be no significant difference in Israel policy whether Kamala or Donald Trump is elected, pretty sure that Trump will give Israel a free hand, will allow Israel access to all the weaponry that it will need to take out Iran's nuclear program. Though I believe Donald Trump will be highly reluctant to wage war, for America to directly wage war on Iran or any country. So Donald Trump was the first president that did not get America into a new war. And that's where Mark Halperin and Tucker agreed that it's been a disaster for America to get stuck in these forever wars, such as in Afghanistan, Iraq, and now in Ukraine. So I was a little bit surprised, though I probably shouldn't have been, by the amount of common ground and the conviviality of the conversation between Halpern and Tucker. So Sukkot, the Jewish festival, begins tonight. So it has an agricultural meaning. This is marking the final harvest in the agricultural calendar. It also has a Jewish historical meaning, a spiritual meaning. So from tonight till Friday night will be the first 2 days of Sukkot. These are holy days. So you can't drive a car, you won't be working, you won't be live streaming. And then you have 2 days of what's called Yom Tov, these Jewish holidays, going straight into then the Shabbat. And the Sabbath is the holiest day of the year. You often hear in the news that Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. No, it's Shabbat. That's when you read the most Torah portions. So we'll have 3 days of Jewish holy days starting tonight. So I will not be back until Sunday morning. And then next week, so next Wednesday evening, is the beginning of Shemini Atzeret, which is the 7th day of Sukkot. And then beginning Thursday night is Simchat Torah, though in Chabad, they have essentially 2 days of Simchat Torah. So that's dancing with the Torah. You'll see a lot of booths. So the English word for Sukkot is booth or tabernacle. So Jews will often eat outside, even sleep outside, drink outside, do everything in a booth. And it's particularly festive, happy, joyous, celebratory time. One thing that surprised me about the observance of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur was that it was more festive and upbeat than I expected before I converted to Judaism. But still, by comparison with Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are particularly solemn days. Yep, I converted to Orthodox Judaism. I was raised a Seventh-day Adventist Christian.